Curiosity can take you a long way in life. For Kaniel Cassady, a scientist working on the development of life-changing medicine, it's taken him everywhere, from Marysville to New York, and from New York all the way around the world. But most importantly, it's allowed him to fully explore his desire to make a positive impact in the world. Today, Kaniel is part of a global group of scientists who collaborate with the singular goal of improving people's lives. He joined us to discuss his journey and why the work is so important to him. Hi everyone, welcome to Wildcat Conversations. Kaniel, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Hi Clayton, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to kick things off. Would you mind giving us just a quick overview, kind of a snapshot of what your role looks like and what your work looks like on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So first of all, as you mentioned, I'm a scientist at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals here in New York. I work more specifically in the Hematology Clinical Development Unit, where we are developing and testing medicines specifically for hematological malignancies and other hematological disorders. Day to day is a little difficult to predict. So I work with a team around the world. So last night I was talking to a team member in Malaysia at 10 p.m. And this morning I woke up and spoke with a colleague in Austria. So drug development takes a team. It's a global endeavor, and day to day can take you all over the world, even if you're sitting in New York.
What's the collaboration like? You know, just having a team across the world, and you know, when you're passionate about something, just being able to connect with folks who are like-minded, sort of in their goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's the key. Is we're working as such a large team, as you mentioned, all over the world, but we're driven by the same passion. We're driven by this unmet need around the world for patients who have diseases that need treatments, and so there's this unifying force amongst us that really smooths out this collaboration and allows us to synergize together. And so it's extremely rewarding. And again, I think it's this drive to deliver medicines to patients that keeps us focused and keeps the wheels turning.
I know you graduated with a degree from Chico State in molecular biology. Were you compelled to get into the medical field from the beginning? Was that a calling to you, or was it something that you developed along the way as your career progressed?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would say I could classify my career path as a little bit nonlinear. So my dad is a physician himself, and so growing up, I come from a large family. I think there was a natural pull toward the medical field. And when I was at Chico, I was actually pursuing a pre-medical degree with the purpose and the intent to go to medical school. But it was while I was at Chico that I found a passion for research and discovered that doing research, you could actually make a career and get paid for being curious and for asking questions. And so while at Chico, I pivoted. And while I had begun Chico thinking I would go to medical school, I pivoted and actually only applied to PhD programs. And from there, I attended a school in Southern California and got my PhD. And again, not really with the intent of winding up in the pharmaceutical industry, but with this goal of asking questions about diseases and disease processes to eventually hopefully help people. So a little bit nonlinear, I would say. Growing up in a physician household helped draw me toward the medical community, but a little bit of my own path woven in there as well.
Was there something about your time at Chico State that helped you prepare for this type of profession?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say, Chico State may not be one of the largest, most well-known, scientific bachelor programs out there or master's program out there. But for me, it was exactly what I needed to prepare myself for the next step. And I say that because at Chico, I had, unfettered access to professors. And in your wet lab, which in the sciences, a large part of your classwork is in the laboratory, you're not working with a graduate student, rather you're working directly with a professor. And there's small class sizes, and I found that one-on-one interaction with folks like Larry Haney and Daniel Clark and Andrea White and David Keller and Dr. Schierenbeck, all of these professors who I still remember by name, 10 years later, left a lasting impression on me. And it's by working with them that I realized that research was a passion. And so for me personally, attending Chico State was instrumental in not only finding my passion, but preparing me with the wet laboratory experience for a research career and to segue nicely into a PhD program.
The work that you're doing now, what is it that compels you to do it? You kind of touched on it earlier on where you were talking about everyone kind of having the same mission and the same idea. For you personally, what is your why for this work?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. On the one hand, I personally feel like we are in the era of science fiction when it comes to the work being done in the medical field. I'm working on programs, as I mentioned, across hematology, but programs that 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago weren't possible to even conceive, and they really were science fiction. Things like genomic editing and envisioning a future, which is now, of a drug which is a one-time administration that can cure a disease by changing the genomic material of a person with this disease. We're doing that today with diseases like hemophilia, which is a lifelong affliction, and it requires a patient to administer exogenous factor daily, weekly. There's now the possibility that we'll be able to cure this disease with a single administration, and that a patient may never again need to administer the exogenous factor on their own. To me, this is science fiction. In the oncology world, in the field of cancer, over the last decade, there's been a boon in, rather than developing drugs that target the cancer, we're now developing drugs that actually boost the immune system and assist your body in eradicating the cancer rather than developing drugs that target the cancer specifically. It's an entire mind frame shift that you're able to redirect and unmask aspects of the immune system that allow your own body to cure itself, as opposed to, again, putting in drugs that target the cancer itself. So to me, that's one aspect, is it's sort of a playground of science fiction that we find ourselves at this cross-sectional time point in history. But the other is, and I think many of us in this community are driven by this desire to help people. We see patients in the work that we do. We see patients and individuals that have diseases that have been characterized as hopeless, things that are uncurable or incurable, and simply, again, by asking questions, by trying to get to the bottom of the pathogenesis and the reason for the disease, that we can provide hope, that we can actually touch lives and change lives. So I think it's a bit of both. It's this boyish curiosity and ability to ask questions, but also that it's potentially life-changing and at the individual level. I think that's what drives me personally.
What is it about serving, people in the community, that's kind of connected to who you are as a person?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. So as I mentioned, my dad is a physician. We grew up in Northern California, in between Chico and Sacramento, which is classically characterized as small farming communities, but also an area that is maybe disproportionately affected by drug and alcoholism. And my dad has spent his entire career entrenched in these communities as a addiction physician and a specialist in these communities. And growing up in that environment, where we went with my dad to his clinic that he held regularly at the rescue mission in our local community, sort of impressed upon me as a young person this philosophy of giving back to the community and to those around us. And today, I volunteer. I work with Big Brothers Big Sisters as a big brother. I also sit on the board, and I do this because I think in the STEM community, Clayton, often we focus on the next up and coming, bright, shining, smartest person out there, and we put a lot of attention and a lot of resources on these individuals who arguably are going to do really well in and of themselves. And when we talk about diversity and inclusivity in the STEM community, I think there's an opportunity to intersect earlier in other populations that maybe are just less aware of the opportunities that are out there in science and these fields. And so I personally am driven by spending time with the younger generation, kids who maybe they don't know if they want to be a scientist or a firefighter or join the military. They're not sure what they want to do with their careers, but it's an opportunity to open their horizons to what else may be out there. Whether or not they become a scientist or a firefighter or join the military, it's an opportunity to shape the next generation. And so personally, I think that's maybe why it's been impressed upon me from the time I was young, but why I spend my time where I do today.
That's fantastic. I wonder, just thinking about students who are enrolled at Chico State today, who come from a variety of backgrounds, what kind of advice would you give to them in looking at your own path? And I think specifically thinking about the STEM field as kind of being historically white and male dominated. I guess what are some things that you would advise students who are looking to broaden their own horizons and enter your field?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Clayton. I think for those who are interested in the STEM fields, who are maybe at Chico State today, who are curious about what the next step could be or what is available out there, it's really, Clayton, I would try to impress upon them exposure. You don't know what you don't know. I had no idea that the world of drug development was as large as it was, with so many different specialized roles, from regulatory to operations to making sure that drugs can make it to where they need to be administered all over the world. So there are many roles in my industry that are relatively masked if you don't know what's out there. And so I think for those who are new to the field, who are curious, I would say ask questions, introduce yourself to people like me, reach out on LinkedIn, reach out via social media and say, hey, your career looks interesting. Well, I have no idea what you do. Can I ask you a question? People respond and they will spend time with you. And so in the STEM field, that's my recommendation, is reach out, gather as much exposure as possible.
What's the most important lesson, for you personally, do you think that your work has sort of revealed to you over time?
So one of the important life lessons that I've learned is, and I actually heard it from a mentor that I had during my PhD work, and it's been reinforced, is that doing science is the easy part. Working with scientists is the hard part. And that's true no matter what you do, is at the end of the day, regardless of where you find yourself, whether it be in STEM or another industry, you're learning a craft, and you'll master the craft and eventually teach the craft for many of us. But at the end of the day, you're still working with people. And so I think it's very important to remember that, to stay kind, to stay focused on the humanity around you, and not lose sight of that, to drive forward a timeline or accomplish a goal. At the end of the day, doing science, doing your job, that's the easy part, and navigating the humanity around you is much more challenging. And that's been a very, very important life lesson that I continue to encounter on a day-to-day basis.
Out of curiosity, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in your industry? Yeah, and then and the flip side of that as well, like what are the biggest opportunities that you feel are, that excite you the most?
Yeah, I think some of the largest challenges, Clayton, are operating a company or even a clinical trial, a study globally, right? We're navigating, and it's a very regulated environment, right? Performing clinical trials. And so navigating a regulatory system like the FDA is extremely important. But when you think about operating a clinical trial in 50 different countries, and each country or each region has its own regulatory agency, it can be very complicated and daunting. So I think that's one challenge as an industry is the globalization and operating on a global level. The other thing is it's just the coordinating of the entire process from end to end, from drug discovery all the way through to manufacturing and commercialization of a new drug. I had another mentor who told me if drug development was easy, everybody would be doing it. Not everybody's doing it, right? It's a complicated process end to end to keep track of and to successfully execute on. A statistic I'll share, there are in the US, I think around 6,000 biotech companies, and we're all working on medicines for patients, technologies and medicines alike. And every year, the FDA approves about 20 to 30 medicines. So if you think about there's 6,000 of us all working together to develop new medicines, and that funnels down to about 20 or 30 approvals a year. It's hard work, Clayton. And so in general, I would say it's, as a whole, the industry is complicated and challenging, but extremely worthwhile and rewarding. So that's on what's challenging about the industry. On the other side, the opportunity, again, I don't want to harp on this, but I think that we truly are positioned to deliver medicines, life-changing medicines, in a way that's never been done before, and address questions that we were not able to answer prior, simply because technology had not advanced, or our understanding of pathogenesis or disease or biology had not advanced to the point where it is today. And so I think I'm lucky to exist in this day and age where there's so much cool science happening in this field. So I hope that we can continue to capitalize on this as an industry.
Thanks. To kind of bring it back to Chico State, I know your siblings went here too. What is it about, I guess looking at your whole family and how everyone went there, what is it that made you all choose Chico?
So actually, my dad also graduated from Chico State. My uncle, as I mentioned, they grew up near Chico. They both went to Chico State, and it was the sort of the natural thing to do. There's 6 of us all together. So 4 of my brothers, my sister, myself, we all went to Chico State. We all sort of studied different things. But Chico's a unique place. I don't think I need to tell this audience that, but there's I'll use the new lingo. There's a vibe at Chico that's sort of unparalleled of work hard, play hard. You can get out of Chico what you want to get out of Chico, whether it's, in my case, to go on to a PhD program. In my older brother's case, was to go into the Navy as an officer. My other brother's case, who went on to Yale Law School, clerked at the Supreme Court. My younger siblings, one who got a degree in mathematics and is now an actuary. My little sister's an accountant. My little brother's an engineer. You really can get out of Chico what you want. And as I mentioned, it's a very unique place for those students who are looking to really advance their career, get to the next step, but also who don't take themselves too seriously. And that's what I enjoyed about Chico State. And I'm speaking on behalf of the whole family here, but yeah, big Chico State fans over here.
Nice. Out of curiosity, were any of you enrolled at the same time?
Yes, my two oldest brothers were enrolled at the same time. I used to visit them when I was still in high school. I'd come up to Chico and visit them. I was enrolled by myself, and then my three younger siblings were all enrolled concurrently in some uh, a bit of overlap, and many of us lived together in shared housing. I was on 8th and Hazel. So
Very nice, very nice. Is there? Do you have a favorite spot on campus, or somewhere that feels like particularly meaningful to you?
yeah, so I performed. I was in the sciences, so I spent a lot of time in the chemistry building, the School of Natural Sciences, and at Holt. Spent a lot of time at Holt. But I performed research. I had a research project with Dr. Andrea White, who was a bacterial physiologist at Chico State, and we were looking at different bacterial makeups and riparian habitats, which are habitats around water and rivers. And there's a stream that runs through Chico State, and I performed research, digging on the weekends. I would dig up soil samples and take those soil samples into Holt and sequence DNA from microorganisms in the soil there. So when I go back to Chico, I enjoy walking along that stream, thinking back to those weekends when other people may have been out floating, or which I did sometimes too, but where I was, performing research and going into an empty Holt hall and asking questions, looking for answers. So those are very special. And then also another very special place to me in Chico is Riley's, and the Bear. I spent plenty of time at both.
Excellent, excellent. Kaniel, I want to thank you again for your time. This has been really, really fantastic talking with you. I appreciate you sharing your story with us, and yeah, this has been amazing.
Clayton, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for watching. Join us again soon for another Wildcat conversation. To keep up with future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel and Chico State Today. Go Wildcats!